And hello everybody, welcome to episode 2 of painting the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Nighthaunt Black Coach. Today what we're going to do is paint the color areas, I guess, the cloth areas. So I did decide to go with red. In episode 1 I did mention I wasn't sure what color to use. I did decide to go with red. I think that'll contrast very well with the browns, as well as with the blues that are going to be the spirits, the spirit hosts, or whatever they're called. I did also mention that I would paint the cloth on the horses, the barding, on the horses, whatever color I chose to use on the cloth. I changed my mind only because you can see the tails as well as the back portions here. There's really no separation between. Some areas have like a bit of a separation to where you can kind of make out where the cloth ends and then the ethereal part begins, but most areas don't. So we're gonna do all the horses, everything on the horses ethereal, other than obviously the straps and the headpieces and so on and so forth. So really the only portions that are getting the red are the curtains and the cloak on the driver. So what I started out with is deep red from Scale Color. I base coated everything using deep red, and now what we're going to do is start adding some highlights using some Antares Red from Scale Color. So let's get going here, and I already have some deep red here from when I was base coating. Just give this a little bit of a mix. And now the trick with painting red is treated like a marathon, not a race. So the more you take your time with adding highlights, the more highlights you add, the better it's going to look. Basically keep it as smooth as possible between the highlights. So basically I'm just going to add a drop of Antares Red for every highlight, and we're probably going to end up applying, I'd like to think at least 6 or 7 layers of highlights to make sure that we get as smooth transitions as possible. And then we're going to end up going in with some black for the shadows, and then probably going back over with some red afterwards to make sure shadows aren't too deep. So obviously the first highlight is going to be very thick as far as coverage on the entire model. And obviously, use your light source as a point of reference as to where to add the highlights on and so forth, if you're not entirely sure just by looking at the model. But as I said, the first one is going to cover mostly everything other than the deepest parts, as you can see. There's really no magic trick to painting red. Red is actually one of my favorite colors to paint. A lot of people struggle with red. Yeah, I actually enjoy painting red, believe it or not. I haven't really had any issues with it. It's just, as I said, it takes a little bit of patience. And you just have to take your time with coverage as far as what you're adding for highlights and so on and so forth. Don't make it too stark right away, only because that's where you end up having issues with it. There's always various options as to what to shade red with. You can use blue, you can use purple, you can use brown, and you can use black. I like black only because that adds the greatest contrast in my opinion. That said, purple and blue and or brown work just as well. It depends on the effect you're trying to achieve, obviously. Anyways, I am going to continue this off camera, and I'll come back to you guys when it's when the first highlight's done. Alright folks, so not much of a difference yet. You might be able to see some of it pop a little bit. It's what it's doing right now. It's just basically adding a solid color to it. That's not starting to pop quite yet, but I think with the next highlight it should. So as I said, easy does it. There isn't much paint left on here, but we're gonna add directly to here, just not nearly as much, so it doesn't make it too bright. I think that's more than enough. Stir it up. This might actually be a little too bright. As I said, there wasn't much paint left over, so add some more base coat in here so it doesn't. There we go. That's much better. Stir. Right, actually no, yeah, let me, no, this is uncomfortable to hold at this point, so let me use this guy as an example. So again, you know, every highlight you're going to use smaller and smaller areas that we're going to cover, obviously. So now at this point, we are going to try and stick to the raised areas for the most part. So like, I won't bother going in here because that's filled nicely with the base coat. Now here, we're probably only going to go about halfway up. And so on and so forth. So basically with every highlight we're just going to cover less and less of an area. This might actually bring all the way down just to give it a nice flow to it. And so yeah, let me continue on with this, and I will come back to you guys for the next highlight. Alrighty, and we're back again. Now it's starting to pop a little bit, so we're well on our way of getting where we want to be, or having it look the way we want it to look, but still got a long ways to go. So still running a little low on red. I'm using quite a bit more on the cloak than I thought I would be with every pass, but I think we'll be okay for the time being. Again, add another drop of Antares Red into the mix. Mix it up, and I think this will make it quite a bit brighter, but hopefully not too bright. I might add half a little drop of the base color. Yeah, alright, this should actually work quite nicely. So again, now at this point we kind of want to be a little bit more selective even with our highlights. So let's start at the very top here and just kind of work on the top folds. Kind of start defining the folds of the cloth here. if that makes sense. And bring this all the way down, but we're not gonna cover anything in here anymore. We're just gonna bring it down in the folds. Now remember, we're also going to shade using black as well when the time comes. And this is the point where it starts popping a little bit now. Not nearly as much as it's going to when it's said and done, but this is where the color starts popping a little bit, so you really start to get that rich red poking through, which is exactly what we're going for on here. Now this doesn't have to go all the way down. Alright, I'm going to continue this and come back to you guys when it's done. Okay, and the next highlight is done. And it's starting to pop a little bit now, which is exactly what we're going for. It's starting to look really nice in the folds now. So I'm going to bring this up about, I'll probably do 4 or 5 more highlights on this. I'm going to do most of it off camera, however, just to save time. Essentially what we're going to keep doing is adding 1 drop of Antares Red into our mix for every highlight, and again another 4 or 5 highlights, and then go from there, so that you guys know. Anyways, I'm going to get started on it, and I'll come back when those are done so that we can start shading. Okay, so 6 highlights later, and this is where we stand. What I'm going to end up doing, hopefully you guys can see this. I mean, I know my camera usually records a little darker than it shows up on my screen, but it's kind of a little too bright. Anyways, so this was I was going to do all the highlights obviously and then come back to you guys and go over the shading, but I figured the final edge highlight we'll do a quick segment on camera. So the final one is going to be pure Antares Red. Now this is significantly brighter than what's in our mix over here, but that's what we're going for because this is going to be a very, very fine and a very, very positional highlight. So it's only really going to cover a few specific areas. Let's see. Basically just the very, very, and actually there's a little too much paint on my brush. Just the very tips of what I want to make pop the most basically on here. Just like that. And that'll make it stand out just enough to where it pops nicely, but isn't overly bright. It's gonna add a nice That's adding a really nice contrast to it, especially once we get the black in like the deepest crevices and deepest recesses. This is really going to stand out quite nicely. So, but as I said, I mean, this is just going on the very, very highest points here that we want to make stand out as much as possible. As you can see, and I did talk about, in the last video, I also did talk about doing, 2 or 3 episodes of this, no more than that, try and keep it short, but I actually think I'm going to keep it, what I'm doing is keeping the episodes short, and in turn, or instead, going to do a multi-part series. So like this episode is obviously painting the red portions. The next episode is going to be the spirits, so on and so forth. That does result in shorter episodes, and it also results in me being able to upload more often, because as soon as I'm done with this red, I can start editing and start uploading right away, as opposed to waiting, a day or two to start painting another portion, and so on and so forth. I know there's folks out there too that prefer shorter episodes over the longer ones. Now I do think I'm still gonna continue to do some longer episodes on some projects, only because I enjoy those. I guess I like hearing myself talk. But yeah, this Black Coach series, I am going to keep the shorter episodes. More episodes, but shorter. And so on and so forth. So yeah, this is what I'm going for. So let me go through and do the drapes on the coach itself, and then we'll come back and do the shadows. Alright, and we are getting there. So this is what it looks like with the final highlight on it. Quite happy with it so far. So now comes probably the trickiest part of this entire process. So what we're going to do is apply a very, very, very thin black glaze into all the recesses. So glaze medium and flat black are our friends. 1 drop of flat black. Doesn't have to be much. Remember, this is going to be very, very thin. Glaze medium, on the other hand, well, go to town. Put some water in here. Mix it up. And you should end up with something that looks very much, very milky, very gray even, very much unlike black, which is exactly what we're going for. Because this is going to be very thin. Gotta give it a good mix too to make sure that it all doesn't separate on you, because once it starts separating and you get uneven application, then that just opens you up to making quite a few boo-boos. So start with this guy. Load your brush. Don't load your brush too liberally. Load your brush quite actually, let me show you guys how I do this. So I keep this paper towel in my palette here. Load my brush. I wipe most of it off. See that? And then we're ready to apply our glaze. And this is only going to go in the deepest recesses here, to just give it that extra contrast and that extra oomph. And we're probably going to end up applying maybe 2 or 3 coats of this in much smaller applications every time. So you see I'm doing it. I did this entire area here, so next time I'll only do a smaller portion in the deepest shaded area, so on and so forth. So, but this is basically the trick to this is, number one, do not under any circumstances overload your brush with this stuff. If you do, then obviously just clean it off the figure once you realize that you've overloaded a little bit. Number two, you really want to keep this as thin as humanly possible, because really you're better off applying a bunch more coats on here than just getting one too heavy, and then it ended up looking like crap. So this is what the first coat looks like. It does leave a sheen behind, obviously, but that'll all go away once we put the matte varnish on here at the very end when we're done with the model. So anyways, let me continue on with this, and I will come back at the very end to show you guys what this looks like and to give you a walk around the entire model. Dry fit again like we did with the first part with the wood, and then that'll be it. So I'll be back in a second. And we're back. So this is where we stand with the red. It is all done. Pretty happy with it. I didn't go too dark on the shading on the black, but I like it. I think this is going to add a very nice contrast to the model when it's done. Especially since we're going to be painting all the horses, all the spirits, and all that stuff with a nice rich blue, an ethereal blue that I'm going to use on here. I haven't figured out what exact color I'm going to use on here, but it is going to be a nice ethereal blue that I'm going to try going for. Anyways, that's it for this episode. There wasn't nearly as much of the red as I thought there would be. I thought there would be quite a few more. Again, I was planning on painting the horses, but that didn't materialize, obviously, because there's no clear divides like we talked. There's no clear divides between the actual barding and the horses themselves, so we're going to end up making these completely ethereal. Next episode is going to be, that episode is where we paint all the spirit portions, all of the ethereal parts of it, including the driver, the 3, I don't know, I'll call them wardens, I guess, up here, the horses, as well as all the magical energy around the kit. It's starting to come together, though, starting to look really cool, and I'm starting to get excited about it because, well, it's, again, this being my first kit after such a long break without painting, I'm happy how it's coming out, and yeah, I'm getting real excited about it. So hope you guys enjoyed. I know this was a fairly short one, I think, but that's how I'm going to keep it. And basically, there's going to be one video per section, so the next video might be a little longer since there's a lot more of the ethereal parts. Not to mention they're going to be a little bit more complicated to paint. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, comment, subscribe, like, so on and so forth. If you didn't, let me know. Tell me they suck. Tell me what to change. Tell me what to do better. Thank you for watching, and until next time.